In this video, I want to start going through and setting up the firearm to give you an idea on just how to basically configure everything. So basically, it's going to be a replacement for the example. So to begin, we're going to be using the SK rifle of the FPS Assault Pack, and that's just so we can get the base of it set up, and then later on, we're going to switch to the one without any attachments, so that way we can start actually adding attachments and give you an idea on how the attachment manager works. Now to begin, under the tutorial folder, I made a new one called Firearm, and we're just going to create a new actor in there. So pp_tutorial firearm. If we open this on up, we can go ahead and add a skeletal mesh. We will make it the root, and we're just going to do the SK rifle, like so. Now, a firearm in this context with the system has three components. One is optional, and that's going to be the procedural anim component, but you likely would want procedural animation with it, so it's kind of a given. First thing we need is going to be the firearm component itself. Then we're going to need the attachment manager. Then we're going to need the procedural anim component. Now if we click on the firearm component, here we have the firearm mesh component name. That's going to correspond to the firearm, and likewise the attachment manager component name. Now as you hover over it, it states that this is mandatory, so we do need our attachment manager. So we'll start from the top. So the firearm mesh component name is going to be skeletal mesh, so it's going to correspond to the firearm mesh that it wants to read everything from. And likewise, the attachment manager is going to be SKG attachment manager. Now, if you're inheriting from other classes, you might have a name in parentheses beside it. You would use that name instead. Okay, so moving on up, we have the procedural anim component. Likewise, we have the procedural mesh name. That's going to be the skeletal mesh. And then for the attachment manager, there's nothing for you to really go through and change here. So we can test and check that things are configured correctly by seeing if we have any assertions. So I'm going to drag and drop it into the world, press play, and as long as you don't get any spam in here or a crash, which you should read the output log, it'll tell you exactly what's wrong, which I'll have a dedicated video on in the future. We are pretty much good to go to move forward. So to begin, in our character here, we're going to go ahead and change it out to the tutorial firearm. And we're going to leave everything as is. So I'm going to press play. And currently, as you can see, we're basically in just the A pose. So IK handguns over here. So we need to correct what is actually being used. So we can do that by the actual procedural anim gameplay tag. So if we head over to the anim BP, we can see how that's getting used. So here we have the held actor tag. That's what it is for. So right there we are using the idle rifle hip, which has IK handgun out here in the A pose, whereas we want it to be the tutorial M4 idle. So if we're using the held actor tag M4, we're going to match that. So we're going to use the held actor tag for the M4, compile, save, and press play again, and now we are using it. So if I go to aim, we aim with the root because none of that's configured yet. So we're going to be going through and tweaking some of this up, including setting up the left hand for the offhand with the offhand IK component. So next up, let's go ahead and we will fix the left hand actually. Let's go ahead and just get that out of the way. So we're going to add a SKG offhand IK component. And likewise, it has the offhand IK mesh name, which is skeletal mesh. Then we have the socket that we want to use. So we don't have a socket currently, so let's go ahead and create one. So we're going to open up the mesh. And we're actually going to do this on the skeleton. So it'll carry down to the other SK rifle without the attachments. So we're going to create a new socket. I'm going to call this one S_left hand IK. And I'll leave it somewhere in there for now. We'll just leave it there. So we want to remember the name. So S_left hand IK. And we're going to paste that into the left-hand IK socket name. Now likewise, if I press play, we can see that the hand is positioned differently, but it's still using the normal pose. It's not using the one of the actual, holding firearm. So like if we open up this guy here, you can see the left hand is basically playing a pose to actually grip the firearm. So we want to tell it to use this pose for the left hand. So A tutorial, M for idle. So for the left hand IK pose, we're going to use A underscore tutorial, M for idle. And now you can see the hand is playing the correct pose. We just need to adjust the position. So what we can do is we can drag out this guy and just move the socket around like so. So I'm going to do this off screen just because it's a little bit easier. And get it in the rough position. And my camera is at super speed. So do there, and we'll unextend the left arm a bit. And we'll go somewhere about like this. Eventually we're going to swap this out for a 1-frame animation so it's not performing all this additional movement because we really don't want it. But there's my new position, so I'll hit save and we are good to go. So now we just have the actual firearm and we are basically set. So we still have some basic like rotation lag, movement lag, and all that stuff out of the box without having to do anything fancy with curves. One thing we want to do though is let's go ahead and get aiming set up. So very similar to how we just did the offhand IK, we do the exact same thing with aiming. So here under procedural aim socket names, we do have one that just gets created by default, and that's what we're going to use. So we can leave basically everything here. We can just copy this, we can rename it, we can do whatever we want as long as it matches the name of the socket we want to try to find for aiming. So again, I'm going to go ahead and open up the skeleton, create a new socket. I want to name S underscore aim. And I'm going to make this kind of easier to get started with. So I'm going to position it at the front sight post. And the way this will be is it'll get it pretty close to start off with. Our rotation's probably off. So if I aim, you can see the firearm points straight down. So we need to adjust the rotation on the pitch so it points straight up. And there we go. So now, if I press F8, we can see the front sight is, I'm guessing, too low. Anyhow, we're just going to bring this straight back and put it at the rear sight. And yeah, we can see it's a little bit on the low side. Oh, I just noticed this carrying handle material is all messed up. So maybe that's the, I guess that's the third, material index, or second material index. So we'll move this up into the center, like so. Then when we aim, we can just barely see it. So I'm not sure how well it shows up on the video. So I'll try to move straight forwards. Yeah, so we're going to raise it up just a tiny bit more. And that's basically dead center with the rear sight, so you can just barely see the left side of the, well, there's front sight post, there's the left, and there's the right. It is perfect. Well, I'd say like 99% perfect centered. It's very, very close. And yeah, so now we can aim. So that's the basics of setting up a firearm with the procedural animation and such. There are more stuff that we're going to go into, but I'm trying to keep these videos relatively short. But you can tweak some certain things, like we can enable dead zone, for example, just by checking that box. And actually, I never added that input, so we are not ready to actually use that yet. I forgot. But in the upcoming videos, we'll be adjusting like the movement sway and all that kind of stuff. And those things need to be set up by curves so that I can kind of give you an idea on what to use, how to adjust the curves and all that kind of stuff just in the next few videos. But this is a good starting point. We have the base set up and now we are ready to move forward. So I'll see you in the next one.